Hello, this is Professor Keene, and this is Introduction to Astronomy at Wisconsin Lutheran College. In the last lecture, we were discussing Aristotle's book on the heavens. We were looking at Book 2, chapters, 4, 5, and 6. This is on we're up to about page 14 in A Student's Guide Through the Great Physics Texts, Volume 3. You might remember at the end of the last lecture, Aristotle, I guess this is at the end of Book 6 on page 14, Aristotle mentions that there is one heaven, I'm just going to quote this, there is one heaven then only, and that it is ungenerated and eternal, and further that its movement is regular. That has now been sufficiently explained. So let's recall what we were talking about there. So by heaven, once again, he does not mean the place where our souls go when we die. He's talking about that region far away from the earth, that is the moon and above as you look up into the sky. And he's making a claim here that it is, first of all, there's only one heaven. That is, what we see around us is all that really exists. So we see the heavens up in the sky. There's not some other universe somewhere else that's outside of our domain of perception. Another thing that he claims here is that the heavens are ungenerated and eternal. That is, they did not have a beginning and they will not have an end. Why would he claim this? Well, you might think about it from the perspective of looking at nature around us. So as far as the historical records go, Aristotle was around in about 350 BC, but he had historical records dating back to then ancient times. And people had been observing the motion of the sun, the moon, and the stars for many, many years. And it seemed that for as long as the records had existed, the sky had seemed to move in the same way. People had talked about Orion and the Big Dipper and other constellations in ancient texts. And so he said if they were the same back then as they are now, there's no reason to think that they were ever any different. There's no compelling evidence for believing that they were ever any different. Another way to think about this is if you think about you have parents, and your parents had parents, and their parents had parents, and you might have genealogical records going back for 20, 40, 100, 300 years, 500 years, and as far as your records go back, likely each of the parents had parents. So he's really saying if our records suggest that each thing had a predecessor, there's no reason to think that there was a beginning or an initial state where there were no parents. So this is the kind of reasoning that Aristotle has. He thinks that there was no beginning, and likewise there will be no end to the universe. It's interesting because later on, when astronomers, we're jumping ahead a little bit here, later on when astronomers like Copernicus and Kepler in the 15 and 1600s, who themselves are Christians, when they start reading Aristotle and trying to understand Aristotle, a lot of what they're going to do is try to reconcile their beliefs with those of Aristotle. They're going to say, we agree with Aristotle on a few things, but we disagree with Aristotle on others. One of the things that they disagree with Aristotle on is they believe that the universe had a beginning. Why is that? Well, because Copernicus, being a Catholic, and Kepler, being a Lutheran, both take the historical records in scriptures very seriously. And they say, although it seems, if you kind of look back at these, the generations from your parents to your grandparents, it is true that it seems like there wasn't a beginning. If we supplement that observation with historical records like in scripture, it's apparent that there was a first man and that God created the universe. So they're going to have to wrestle with these kind of ideas of Aristotle. We'll see this later on in the course. Okay, so Aristotle, nonetheless, believes that the heavens are ungenerated and eternal. And furthermore, he says its movement is regular. By that, he means it's not speeding up or slowing down. If you look at the motion of the stars, they rise in the east and set in the west, and they're going at a constant speed across the sky. In other words, their movement is a constant speed. They're not accelerating or decelerating.